We hear it all the time. You have to have a strong data portfolio, you have to write clean code, but what does that even mean? I'm here with this video to help you figure that out. My friend Avery sent me a Jupyter notebook for me to review and to give some highlighted feedback to help you learn how to write a great notebook yourself. We're going to be using the software Deepnote, which is sponsoring this video. Deepnote's an awesome tool for collaborating in data science. You can put Jupyter notebooks in a shared workshop space, and from there you can both edit at the same time. You can add comments similar to Google Docs, and I think it's just a really great tool to help learn and teach data practices to people in a collaborative way. So let's get started. So this is the Jupyter notebook that Avery shared with me. I created a Deepnote project, I sent him the link to collaborate together, and now we can both work on this together. He sent me this to review, and real quick, big shout to Avery. I really appreciate you sharing your notebook with me. Go give him a follow. He's an awesome data person, especially if you're trying to pivot to a data role from another career. So let's go check out his notebook. He sent me a notebook for predicting the stock market with Python, just code. One of the first things I do when seeing a new notebook, before even going line by line, I'm gonna skim through the entire thing first. So this is an initial draft. This isn't a complete notebook. And so he's more so giving it to me, not necessarily to fix mistakes, but tell him like what's the direction he can go after he's kind of did this first layout. And so when creating a notebook for your own portfolio, it kind of breaks down to like 4 separate phases. The first one is just defining the problem and finding the data. The second one is just getting all the thoughts out there, getting the code out just like this. The third part is cleaning up the code to make it easy for others to read. And then finally, the cool thing about notebooks is that you essentially have a way to add text that can give you the data story that the code can't always give. And even more than comments, it's adding that thick description to your code. And I think this is really important for portfolio pieces because you're able to share with people how you can connect the data to a business problem. So let's get started. Off the bat, I feel like I have very little information on what to do for the code. So my first comment in here is going to be make a strong description. You want to have something that'll get people excited. Now we'll start the code. Right here, I'm making the suggestion. You should leave this as code and have all your imports. And so something you can also consider is like a requirements.txt file, which essentially takes all your imports that you have and saves it. You can use pip freeze to get all your different requirements, and you can use that to bring in all your packages you want for Python. But I would argue, especially since Avery's audience are people who are transitioning into data, that may be too much for early stage. And so having them all early in the beginning just helps people understand what they're about to get themselves into. And also, if they forget to run a cell, it won't cause an error later on. That's why I like having it all at the beginning. And in addition, I want to add, use this space to describe what analysis or model you are going to do. This all goes back to thinking about your audience and getting them excited about the rest of the notebook. How are you going to convince someone, especially if you're looking for a job maybe, to read all this notebook and skim through if you don't give them a reason to? And so this is where I think this is prime real estate for that. And so now Avery is giving some context about how to pick various things for a ticker symbol. I really like this aspect right here of making it simple for people to input here. And again, thinking about his key audience, they may be relatively new to functions and typing. So having something to fill out right here just makes it easier for folks. So I really like this. And here you see Avery having people install packages. And for my personal opinion, I think this should be moved to the beginning, so they have all the installed packages they need earlier. And this is why he's importing the sys package, SYS, because it allows you to use kind of like pip within your notebooks. Awesome. So I'm gonna leave a comment here. I like keeping various functions like installs and imports all at the top, because countless times I've created errors and bugs where I might have an import in the middle of the notebook, and then I might delete the cell on accident. All of a sudden now my code's not working. It makes it very difficult. So just having everything at the top makes things a lot easier for both the reader and the audience that are learning, but also just for your own sanity. One of the key things I'm noticing here is the flow of the notebook. I feel like Avery could really be benefiting the audience by adding more kind of header columns to kind of break up the thought process. So I'm gonna leave a comment here. And then if you're relatively new to Jupyter Notebooks, I'm just gonna add a block here for Markdown. And just a quick way you kind of see. So this is normal text, right? Now we have a header, boom. And then you can also do different sizes. And so this is really helpful because now, you know, say for instance, this is like the data preparation phase. I'm gonna use data preparation as the header, but then I'm gonna use these subheaders right here that are smaller to signal like, hey, for part of the data preparation phase, this is the cleaning the dates phase. This is the doing some data transformations phase. And this helps your reader quickly glance across as well and guide the reader down your notebook to make it a lot stronger for your portfolio. Great. So now Avery is getting a new data set and bringing it together to a new data frame. Cool. Now the data pooling is complete. Great. And so right here, this kind of this header plus kind of information to give further context. This stuff's really great to have in your notebooks. Again, helps inform the reader what's happening, keeps them out of the dark, and makes for a great reading experience for your portfolio. So now we're getting to the part where we're defining functions. I love Python functions. I think they're super cool, especially classes. And so off the bat, some things that I would love to add to here. And again, you have to be mindful of your audience. So I think many times when for the content that Avery's creating, he's going for beginners. So beginners or people who are transitioning, you know, they mainly need to learn about functions. They need to learn about how to use pandas. But if you want to take it a step further, review PEP 8. What are kind of the best practices? So I can leave notes here, but I'm going to say like I'm going to add a redo of the function to add PEP 8 best practices for reference. And you really have to understand what's your core audience and what would be best for them. For me, I'm in the camp of I wish I was exposed to these best practices when I first started. And I had essentially years of bad coding practices that I had to unlearn when I got to a job where I had to write production level code. And so it's really up for debate. Do you want to put it in there? You can potentially confuse your audience who are new to it. If that is not your target audience, maybe your audience is like getting a job, right? Then you definitely want to have that in there. And so I'm going to take this, just copy it, and I'm going to create a new code. And again, all these edits, Avery can go see later when he logs into this portfolio project. Furthermore, Deepnote has version control, so you can go back in time to see your earlier stuff, especially if you made an edit that was way off and you need to go back. So off the bat, I want to add some typing. pd.data frame. And so what this does right here, this typing is saying like when you're, for the argument for the function, we need a data frame. And this typing says it has to be a data frame type class. So say for instance, I put in like a list or a matrix, it's gonna error out because it is a typing error. So this helps you create cleaner code and more consistent. And also it informs people what the expected value should be when you put it in there. So Avery has some notes right here. I think something that would be helpful is instead to use a docstring. So a docstring essentially is 3 quote marks. And from there, you can say a brief description of what this, and then I know PEP 8 has various practices, but to keep it simple, I'm just gonna put this in here. So one of the key things too is that oftentimes you hear your code itself is documentation, and you should avoid comments if possible. So one way to kind of highlight that difference is right here we're using comment strings, comment lines right here as marked by this little # hash. And so essentially you're saying what's the input a data frame? Well, we can actually get rid of that comment and say, because we have this typing right here with the code, we're actually already saying this input data frame with the code itself. And then the output is a data frame as well. We can use typing for the output of a function. So actually we can do pd.data frame as well. And so that actually covers both of that. And so instead, what I might do is say arguments, and then from there put df, and then description, the brief data frame. Awesome. Cool. Another thing I like to note when I'm using pandas is instead of using df for the input, have something descriptive. So I'll do docs df. Oops. df. Let's update this right here. And then something tricky with pandas is that you want to use copy a lot or using the code, because sometimes these transformations, if you don't do a copy of it, it can kind of get squirrely and get lost in the track, like which is happening to the data frame itself or a reference of the data frame. And so I think a great way to highlight this is like, say for instance, using the iloc, ILOC function within pandas. Sometimes you'll get an error saying like, are you sure you're referencing the correct pandas data frame, right? So this is what this kind of handles. So I use the copy function quite a bit, and I'm not too worried about memory when doing the copies within functions, because after the function's done running, it clears the memory. Awesome. And so those are the edits I would make. And again, it is, as you look kind of the difference between them, it really just takes it up just a notch to the next level. You're not really doing too much of a difference. It's just more so how you structure the code. And this makes it easier for people to understand and read, and it highlights to the potential employers that like, hey, I know how to code using PEP 8 best practices. I know how to create code that's easy to read. Because again, people aren't compiling this code when you're sharing your notebook. They're reading it. And so if you can make your code more readable, legible, wherever the correct word is, you'll be in good shape. Now he's doing the test train split, splitting the data. Again, use the PEP 8 best practices. I'm not going to edit all of them, but I showed you that one earlier. Now we're making the model. Again, have all the imports at the top. And also by having all the imports at the top, you're able to essentially give a clear kind of preview as well of like what steps you're going to be taking. So now that we have all these functions here, again, I think the function should be documented more. I know that at the top. I think that will really bring this notebook to the next level, and it'll move away from just a pile of code to showing kind of like the best practices you have to share, whether teaching or sharing it for a potential job. So again, using the headers, time to make some money. Love it, Avery. Boom. Awesome. So I really like that he is highlighting and showing these plots. And if anything, something as kind of like a pro tip as well is, again, how do you hook people into reading your output? And so something I would actually do is like take this right here. I'll take a screenshot of it and then bring it all the way to the top. Kind of how blogs have that intro title with the picture below. And again, it makes it engaging for the reader. And so I'm gonna leave that comment here. And so I think having these graphs here showing how these different functions work, I think that's great. And then it's the end. And so I'm gonna add a block here, markdown, and I would say use this section as a summary of what was learned, what the interpretation. So that's the last of it. And I think in summary, kind of the main points from reviewing this notebook is, Avery already had a lot of the code here. I think many times, like I said, that 4 phases of understanding the business problem, first writing out the code. We're in the 3rd phase right now. We're just going through the code, cleaning it up. So putting all the imports and the installs at the top. Another thing is going to the functions and using PEP 8 best practices to go from just comments to actually having your code comment itself, and adding more kind of descriptions, adding typing as well. Another thing you can do if it's important to you is add logging, but that might be overkill for this notebook. And then the 4th phase is actually just cleaning up the actual text of it. And so many times it's not necessarily a big lift in the sense of code, but it's actually just figuring out what's the story you want to tell. So for example, adding that image here at the top to kind of hook in readers, having a title that hook in readers, having a summary here to best describe what is you're going to be doing for the rest of it and why someone should follow. In addition, using headers to your best ability to really break up the pieces of logic so it guides your reader down Again, you want to guide the reader to go read as far as possible. And then finally, making note at the end to do a summary to wrap everything up and have some closing statements. So this completes the video. I hope this provides you enough information to understand what to look out for code, as well as structuring your notebook from a real world example. Again, big shout out for Avery for sharing his notebook for that. In addition, big shout out for Deepnote for sponsoring this, showing their amazing tool to help collaborate with Jupyter Notebooks. If you really like this, comment below. I would love to do more content around this, get better at this, and really have a fun time teaching y'all some really cool stuff in data science and really share my passion. All right, thanks for tuning in. See ya.